The Dakar Rally. Brought to you by Supersport. Sponsored by Total. You know where to turn.
No stage today due to bad weather at the start of today's stage, so it's going to be a road section for all. Everyone has now gone from Chile back into Argentina, literally going over the top of the world. And we'll look back at some other Dakars where the weather has messed us around. At the daily briefing for everyone involved in the Dakar last night in Copiapo, it was announced that due to early morning fog that delayed the start of yesterday's stage, therefore leaving helicopters stranded on the ground, it was too risky to start the stage today after the fog had cleared from Copiapo. That would have meant that the stage wouldn't have started till about midday, and that was going to be a little bit too late. David Castera saying we cannot delay the rally because of the border crossing. There are 120 kilometres run at over 4,000 metres in height, and we must assure our security, as it's easy to do that during the day, but not so easy to do it at night. If we delay the start, people will be driving through the night, and at these altitudes, we can't risk that. So the lucky few who managed to get through yesterday's stage, Copiapo to Copiapo, the 479 kilometres, managed to have a little bit of extra time to prepare their vehicles into the evening, and then before the road section, coming into Argentina back to Fiambala. Once the sun went down at about 8:30 last night, there were many still out there on the stage. But for the hardened few who managed to get back, it was time for some sleep. So today's stage from Copiapo over the Andes to Fiambala was due to be 215 kilometres against the clock, but that has been cancelled. It's just a road section for everybody to get back into Argentina. It was a road section worthy of a holiday, running at over 4,500 metres in height for some of the road section over the pass of San Francisco. The sights were just breathtaking. We're used to some breathtaking sights on the Dakar over the 30 years that we've been running it, but today really was up there for many to remember for a very long time. Out of the Atacama Desert, climbing to the heights where it hasn't rained for over 300 years. Passing the world's tallest active volcano at nearly 7,000 metres in height as well. The motorbikes on the public road section. The Dakar organisers had done the same route during the night, but during the daylight, all was to be seen for the bikers. Cyril Desprez saying it's just magnificent. I've never seen all of this before. You having trouble breathing? And Cyril says, no, it's okay. I live up in the mountains, so that should have helped me to acclimatise. I could easily ride a stage up here. Everybody sauntered along, including the flamingos. Over the pass of San Francisco and out of Chile and into Argentina, over 4,700 metres high. Now then, the overall standings. still led by Mark Comer from David Fretinier's 450 Yamaha, Dupre third, Villadoms and Rodriguez. David Casteu in 6th, Oliver Setters dropped to 7th, so has Lopez dropped down a bit, Verhoeven and Knoyman. The cars, they had to do exactly the same road section today. The lone Mitsubishi left, that of Nani Roma, went over the top of the world, so did Robbie Gordon. Robbie Gordon 5th in the overall standings with his two-wheel drive Hummer. And as always in Chile and Argentina, the fans were out in strength, even at well over 4,700 metres high. Gordon's Hummer really is one of the crowd pullers on this year's Dakar. Wherever the Hummer is, there's always some crowds. Overall, Carlos Sainz continues to lead, now 27.5 minutes ahead of his teammate Mark Miller and De Villiers. Roma in 4th, Tollefsen the leading Norwegian, Holovic dropped to 7th, Kuipers, Depping and Palik inside the top 10 for Hungary. It was a tortuous stage yesterday, the looping stage starting and finishing in Copiapo. The depths of the Atacama Desert, above the clouds first thing in the morning, breathtaking, not the words. The organisers said that the dunes would be sharp, and that they certainly were. Look at the views from the height of the top of that dune down into the more verdant vineyards below. Ivar Erik Tollefsen threading his way through the top of the dunes whilst others were struggling elsewhere. The stage had already been shortened by 200 kilometres. It was due to be 670 kilometres. That's nearly 420 miles in length. How anybody got through even when it was shortened is just beyond belief. The bikes were first to hit the dunes and the first to really find out how difficult the navigation was. A tricky roadbook got many confused, including that of the overall leader Mark Comer and also Cyril Dupre, the man in 3rd overall. The pair of them going some 28 kilometres off the beaten track, if there was a beaten track that is, and losing precious time. At one point we thought back at base in Copiapo that Comer had lost his overall lead. In fact, it was just the electronic Iritrack system on his works KTM that wasn't functioning properly. He was actually perfectly okay. But what goes up has always got to come down. And going down is not as easy as it looks. Massive dunes, massive slopes. No wonder the Atacama Desert is considered a sand borders paradise. And once you're over the top, if there's anybody behind you, you are going to rooster your mate. The tail going up. And because the stage had started so much later in the day, some 2 hours and 40 minutes later, the conditions even warmer for many out there. Jürgen van der Gerberg having a good run, the former Grand Prix rider, continuing on. The Dutchman in his first Dakar. But what about the trucks? The kings of the desert, not necessarily kings of the dunes. Many of them having trouble to get their 12 tons up, let alone down. And the last thing you need to do is put any lock on and risk rolling 12 tons all the way down the valley. It was a nearly moment for this one. I wouldn't want to be in there. Whilst coming down, put it in gear and keep it in a very low gear at that. There were whole camps of trucks out there, dune basins filling up with cast iron. Now this Dutch squad had a slightly more fundamental problem. Not only were they stuck at a crazy angle, risking the truck rolling back down the dune, but they decided to team up with another team of Dutchmen and try and pull the truck to some sort of normality. Trouble was, one of the tyres had rolled off the rim. The front right tyre had rolled off the rim, and they hardly had any grip at all. We've already seen many trucks roll over on this year's Dakar. We've seen Maticek's Tatra, former stage victor on this year's event, rolling on the way into Copiapo. It's still very easy to make a mistake, but then they decided enough was enough and they had to change that tyre. There were others who were in trouble. Some of them didn't even get to the dunes. This buggy, well and truly written off. Others had rolls, and others, like Janil de Villiers, had massive problems. He said he could have written a whole book about yesterday's stage alone. He got goaded over the top of a very small dune, but then got wedged in to the little valley the other side. He lost about 20 minutes, only a few kilometres before the end of the stage, trying to get himself out. Eric Vigouroux was having fun. The Robbie Gordon and Vigouroux Hummers fitted with sand tyres. It was their kind of stage, and come the end of the stage, Robbie Gordon only just lost out on the stage victory by just 21 seconds. Volkswagen boss Chris Nissen said to Robbie Gordon at the beginning of the day that if the American had won, he would have bought the entire team ice creams. Instead, the ice creams went to Volkswagen after Sainz was victorious. And once the bikes had got to the top, the view just stunning. It's just like climbing Everest. And when the sun started to go down, there were still many people stuck out there in the dunes. It was going to be a long night. The Dakar is a truly massive operation. Everything about the entire event is just enormous. The stages, the routes, the cars, the bikes, the trucks, and also the entire logistics. For 3 weeks, the whole place is on the move in South America and regularly in difficult conditions. Sunshine, wind, cold, and sandstorms. But the organisers have got many ways to organise the entire event. Here is the organisational truck, and David Casteras saying we managed the whole rally here, managed the positions of the helicopters, the doctors, our whole team. Other parts of the bivouac are equally as important. One complete mobile hospital in which they all speak many languages to cover the wide range of situations they will encounter throughout the whole rally. We have 53 people divided into teams on the stage, 3 medical helicopters and an extra helicopter in Chile. We've got 3 race trucks with 1 doctor in each truck, and here we have a hospital that goes from bivouac to bivouac where there are 28 people and a surgeon and an anaesthetist and a radiographer together with a nurse as well. Transporting nearly all of these people around is another job within itself. Sometimes it's done by plane and sometimes it's done by bus overnight. The entire Dakar operation is non-stop. 1.5 tons of food are eaten each day, 12,000 bottles of water each day, all transported by 10 trucks. We've got 2 sets of equipment leapfrogging each other. We have a team of about 70 people joining the caravan from one day to another to cook and service over 2,500 people. Trunks are bought for each competitor as part of their entry fee. But these too have to be moved daily. There are about 250 trunks in total, again, 2 sets for each rider to enable leapfrogging to each bivouac. On the rally this year, 20 bikers actually have no service truck at all. They're on their own, and we have some 40 bikers coming to us each evening to sleep with us, and even though their teams are servicing their bike, they come and ask our advice. Euromaster fit everybody's tyres. They have guys working on their truck who have actually won their chance to work on the rally. Whatever the brand, we'll fit anything. Less the works teams, though. Each person comes with their tyres and we mount them for free. It's purely a first-come, first-served basis. Now, how do these television pictures actually get into your living room? Well, TV is about 220 people on the rally. We're here in the bivouac, and on the stages we have 4 helicopters with special webcam cameras. We also have 5 cameras on the ground. And after working in the morning, these guys give their tapes back to the refueling point, and by satellite, the images are beamed to the edit suite where the editors can start working. We have a server that allows us to work on 20 edits at the same time, and we can produce 6 hours of programming each day. It means that we can cover nearly 190 countries, and we also have a live infrastructure giving 3 hours live each day from the bivouac. The Dakar is not only the world's biggest motorsport event, it's a military operation. The 1983 Paris-Dakar rally started from the Place de la Concorde in Paris. But the Dakar that year was a punishing one. 12,000 kilometres with no rest day planned at all. But the stage between Durku and Agatez was particularly problematic. The wind kicked up into a tremendous sandstorm. And even under clear skies, the Tenerife Desert is crossed using markers every kilometre. Once the sandstorm kicked up, the visibility became nearly zero, and many got lost in the middle of Niger, only a few finding the tree of the Tenerife. The lucky people who got to the tree of the Tenerife had been on the stage for well over 8 hours. And that meant that behind them, many competitors were going to be in trouble, and many went missing. Some walked to Agadez, whilst others, they could only sleep overnight in the desert. Once dawn came, they were found by the Dakar originator, Thierry Sabine, who had flown in by helicopter to offer some help and grace. But still there were others stuck out in the desert. She says, we were lost in the dunes, but finally we got here in the daylight, and we're happy. Through into the middle of the night, the helicopters were unable to fly, and many people still in massive trouble. There were still 4 people that were out there in the middle of nowhere, as still people were arriving at the tree of the Tenerife the next day. He said, once the night came, it was just evil, and we had to sleep out there. Otherwise, we would have got extremely lost indeed.
Quand la nuit est tombée, c'était vraiment l'enfer. L'enfer a commencé parce qu'on ne voyait plus à 3 mètres. On était obligé de...
It was impossible to see where we were going. Such a sandstorm, couldn't see a thing. But still, Christine Caron, Bernadette Sacy, Gilles Deshuel, and Philippe Vassar were still unaccounted for. The military were asked for their help. Also, the local Tuaregs were asked for their help. And after 72 hours, still they were unaccounted for. Eventually, 2 of them found their way to Agadez, whilst the other 2 were found by those Tuaregs. A sip of whiskey, more than welcome. In 1988, the Algerian desert nearly swallowed the Dakar whole. 603 competitors set off into the desert, blissfully unaware of what was awaiting them. Ari Vatanen, Juha Kankkunen, Hubert Auriol and Jacques Lafitte all flung themselves into the unknown. René Metsch was the man who made the route. He said it was to be hard, but what he hadn't banked on was how soft the sand was and how easy it was for the bikes and the cars to just get stuck in the sand. In the end, Hubert Auriol at the wheel of his buggy was forced to quit during the first stage in Africa. Gaston Rayet shone on his motorcycle, but he says, "I'm concerned for the cars. Never mind the trucks." Ari Vatanen was victorious on the stage in his Peugeot 405, but he said it was going to be really hard for the amateurs in there. Jacques Lafitte was not plussed either. Unrepeatable language coming out of the Frenchman's mouth. So for the amateurs in the particularly soft dunes, what were they to do? They could only push on, and even with the Peugeot T16 four-wheel drive, it was difficult. Utter carnage out there. We tried to push and pull the bike for 3 hours, and all we are now is exhausted. So what are you going to do? We don't know for the moment. We're going to take a breather. However, I don't think we're going to go on from here. The trucks were next through the stage, and even with sometimes 8-wheel drive, it was problematic. Once the night came, it was going to be even harder. Technology just wasn't what it is today. In the end, 30% of the competitors were out overnight. This guy saying it's just not made for amateurs. When they said it would be a stage of navigation, well, it isn't navigation, it's just not riding. It's a problem of power. And we just don't have 40 litres of fuel in our backpacks so that we can continue on. Once daylight came, the scene was even worse. One of the historic stages of the Dakar's 30-year history, and no more warming a sight than one of the organisers' trucks to come and collect everybody and get them back to safety. In 1992, the event didn't go near Dakar. It started in Paris, but it went all the way down Africa to Cape Town. But at a dry riverbed, well, it was dry. It was then full of water. This was the height of the battle between the Rothmans Mitsubishis and the Camel Peugeots. And Ari Vatanen's co-driver, Bruno Berglund, jumped into the river to try and see how deep it was. Only just a few hours earlier, it had been dry. Now, Stefan Pederhansel and Danny Laporte managed to get their bikes across, although others then hesitated. So they were one side of the river, and others were not. Pederhansel saying, alone, it's impossible to cross this river. Thierry and Gilles helped me push my bike, and also a few journalists helped too, but now I've got some water in the engine, so although we've crossed the river, we're stuck. So 3 had done what they were supposed to do as the others looked on. Others decided not to get their feet wet at all. So the question was, what were they to do? Gilbert Sabine, he says, well, we could pull everybody back with a rope and the medical car. And then somebody says, what about a helicopter? How much does a bike weigh? The answer was there. And with a few local spectators, they hooked up the 3 bikes that had managed to get the other side of the river and lift them back over. All of that work was ironically done for nothing. Gilles Picard looked on while Stefan Pederhansel said, I don't like to see my bike like that. I prefer to see it in my hands. The weather, always a tempestuous part of the Dakar Rally. We're back in business tomorrow, stage 12, Fiambala, down towards La Rioja, a special stage of 253 kilometres. La Rioja, better known for its cattle farming, and also it was the birthplace of former Argentine president Isabel Martinez de Perón.